Hi, folks. Welcome to the Better Dwelling YouTube channel. I'm Daniel TENCER, and I'm here today with one of the more interesting reporters working in Canada these days. His name is Sam Cooper, and he's an investigative reporter out of Vancouver. And he recently wrote and published a book called Wilful Blindness: How a Network of Narcos, Tycoons, and Chinese Communist Party Agents Infiltrated the West. Now, I can guarantee you, if you read this book, it will slightly shift your perception of what Canada is. It might also shift your perception of how real estate works. So, Sam, thanks very much for taking the time to talk to us today. I'd like to start off with this. Could you tell our viewers, could you describe to our viewers what the Vancouver model is, how that money flows?
Sure, sure. It's really about underground banking. The biggest thing to understand is, as many people know, China has is an enormous source of wealth. It's probably the biggest source in the past 30 years of wealth
Mhm.
flooding out of a country and traveling around the world. And of course, Chinese citizens have a barrier, a capital export limit of $50,000 per year. The Vancouver model is about how that massive wealth gets out of China and travels around the world, especially to cities like Vancouver, but before that, cities, of course, Hong Kong and Macau. And so this is about how, if you want to get your wealth out, whether you're a corrupt official, just a business person that has got very wealthy in the past few
Mhm.
decades, often through corruption, or if you're just a person that wants to dreams of having a student perhaps educated in the West, you can get more than $50,000 out per year by depositing money into an underground bank in China. They can credits in that bank will afford you a loan or really a delivery of that cash in a city such as Vancouver. Uh, Cash will be, let's just say you put $100,000 in China, you arrive at the Vancouver's International Airport in Richmond, you receive $100,000. The trick is it's $100,000 in a hockey bag, it's cash, it's drug cash, and a casino will enable you to deposit that cash, get back casino chips or casino checks after
So
you do a
sorry, I
bit
just
of
want to stop
gambling.
and go back. I
That's
just
the
want to
Vancouver
clarify this
model.
point because I don't know if everybody realizes, but China limits the amount of money their nationals can take out of the country to, I think, $50,000, the equivalent of about $50,000 US. So
That's right.
right.
$50,000 for an
So
individual per year.
that's part of the reason we could say why this is going on is that people want to take more than that out of the country.
Corruption and capital flight is a huge issue for the world. It's an issue for China itself. It's an issue my reporting has shown that has deeply impacted real estate affordability in cities including Vancouver, Melbourne, New York City, Boston, Los Angeles. This comes from Bank of China records that capital flight from China through various means, including what's now become known as the Vancouver model, is driving real estate prices. It's driving luxury automobile sales in New Zealand, in
So tell
Vancouver,
me
around the world.
how this ends up affecting the real estate market. We have people who use these underground banks to shift money, debits and credits and so forth, to another country. They arrive in that country, they get that money. That money was sourced originally from some illegal trade. That's essentially where it comes from, but now it's their money. So what happens then? How does this end up in the real estate market?
This is where it can get complex, so I like to simplify it. The first piece, the thing that blew people's mind and really made my book relevant was this Vancouver model was operated on these triad or Chinese organized crime underground banks in China facilitate this flight of capital out of China into Macau casinos. And then it became not just Macau casinos, but casinos in Vancouver, especially, also seen in Australia. And what it did was it was facilitating the flow of drugs into these other cities. facilitating the collection of drug cash in cities like Vancouver, which is used as a method to complete the transaction to the wealthy persons that travel to Vancouver. They can receive these packets of drug cash. They can gamble in the casino, get checks back, and with their winnings or return of funds, that quickly becomes a down payment on a Vancouver condo or a mansion. And the cycle just continues. I'd like to keep it simple by saying that this isn't just about drug cash. The key concept here is underground banks run by fentanyl and heroin traffickers are in China, they're in Vancouver, they're sending wire transfers from Hong Kong into Canadian banks, uh, massive amounts of funds. It's not just casinos and drug cash involved,
Right.
it's drug banks. And it's a big loop of money moving around the world. I'll give you one case study that really illustrates it. I'm aware of a case where a woman who declares herself a student has bought a $15 million mansion in Vancouver, followed up by a $14 million mansion. By looking at the case, I understand that her family has transferred 100 million from China. They're wanted, or the father is wanted on bribery and corruption charges, and they've wire transferred through these underground drug banks in Hong Kong massive funds into Canadian banks that's gone straight into real estate. That's probably a more direct path to understand how Vancouver, Toronto real estate
And you're
is
saying in
directly
your book, you mentioned
juiced.
that this is now spread to Toronto and Montreal as well, that these markets are also now seeing this kind of underground banking money. Why does it end up in real estate? Like, I think if you're like me, you're a middle class person, and you're seeing yourself having to compete for housing with, you know, international drug lords and stuff like that who are buying up properties all over Vancouver in order to hide or stash their cash. Why real estate? Why not anything else? Gold, you know, exchange, some Chicago Mercantile Exchange futures or something. Why real estate?
Well, all of those securities or immovable assets, whatever they may be, luxury cars, McLarens, they're all used. But as I've described it, real estate in the city of Vancouver is the perfect money laundering vehicle because underground banking and organized crime captured the high end of the market. A home, another brief example, you buy a what's called a Vancouver Special, an old rundown home on a big lot in East Vancouver for, let's say, 2 million. You've done it through this casino money laundering scheme. You knock it down. You then take out more drug cash loans from these very same Triad and Loan Shark networks, renovate this property up to a mansion. Quickly, it becomes worth
Right,
5 million, 10 million, as year after year, this underground banking scheme, the Vancouver model, is used not only to launder money, but to drive home prices up in speculation. Because the first thing to understand is when you're a money launderer, you don't care what you pay. In fact, you want to pay more. But then once you acquire more and more properties and pour more and more drug cash into them, speculation becomes
right.
a
And
part
you
of the
mentioned
play
that
as well as money laundering.
these money launderers or these people who are laundering money through the real estate market end up sometimes even being the developers building entire blocks of homes or even condo buildings. Is that not the case? Like,
That's the case, and I would say, it's good to relate this to a news story, the Pandora Papers. I saw one of the nuggets that jumped out at me was in the city of London. I believe it was the 11-year-old son of a Eastern European state figure. Bought a commercial real estate block for something like
wow, how
35 million
precocious. An
pounds.
11-year-old
That's
with
the
that
city of
kind of
London.
real estate acumen is amazing.
Acumen, pure, what an investor. But again, okay, this is a child from a state figure very likely connected to organized crime intelligence networks in
Hmm.
Eastern Europe. This is London. What happened in Vancouver was that the children of uh, powerful criminals, powerful foreign officials, and very astute business persons were used as fronts to buy massive amounts of property. I'm aware of a case where such a student is allegedly the front for a very well connected person in China who's a developer of large portions of land. And my reporting through a leak from a source alleged that a fentanyl trafficking was connected to this large real estate player in Vancouver now. And in my years of reporting, as I tried to trace sort of this mysterious Pandora paper like flow of money into Vancouver before the Pandora Papers had a name, I found that these large figures that were becoming the biggest developers in the city again and again could be connected to this the casinos, the underground banking, and some of them directly
You
connected
also
to
reported that
international
some of
drug
this
trafficking.
underground banking, this underground banking network centered around Vancouver, Hong Kong, and Macau, is now providing services for all sorts of other organized crime organizations that have nothing to do with East Asia or British Columbia. For example, you mentioned the Sinaloa Cartel is doing business through Vancouver underground banks, and apparently, and this blew me away, Hezbollah is involved. That's incredible.
Yes. It is, and I what I would want your viewers to understand is it's not spy stuff. The price of your home is related to uh, foreign crime networks, including the Colombian and the Mexican cartels, and how the Chinese transnational underground bankers who dominate fentanyl, methamphetamines, and heroin have become the money mover of choice for those Latin American cartels. Vancouver has become the Western world hub for that financial crime activity. And indeed, Hezbollah, Middle Eastern organized crime, also a very strong source of underground banking themselves, but in Vancouver use the services of the Chinese transnational networks. What I found was in Toronto, state sponsored Iranian crime networks similarly were very, very connected, very powerful in this same underground banking mode where uh, Iran has certain sanctions and restrictions on the movement of money. So, underground state sponsored crime becomes a facilitator, moving all kinds of money around the world. And indeed, some of the players that have turned up now in FBI indictments were subjects of my book, and they're deeply involved in developments, mortgage lending, currency
Wow.
exchanges in
Yeah,
northern
that's it's
Toronto.
incredible stuff. It's kind of scary to think that normal people out there have to compete with this kind of money to get into the housing market, and sometimes are buying properties from people who just went legit after a career of selling fentanyl. All of this is pretty alarming. I guess in another from another perspective, Canada is becoming a kind of Switzerland for the underground criminal cartel. I guess there's a lot of money to be made in that. But what in your opinion should we do about it? It occurred to me, until the 1990s, we didn't have legal casinos. We didn't have this node for moving large amounts of cash around. Do we need legal casinos? Should we ban legal casinos and go back to like how things were, or what would you suggest? What could we do about this, in terms of especially helping people with housing affordability?
The first I make the case in my book that the first thing I would say is that I feel, and perhaps you're the same. As someone educated in Canada's system, we're we grow up with the feeling that Canada is a law-abiding and a fair place. But what my sources in the RCMP or even in intelligence world say is that if you look at other nations like the United States or Australia, they have powerful anti-organized crime laws. People may have heard of the Racketeering or RICO Act, which is said to have been the dominant factor that really incapacitated the very powerful mafia families in New York City, which grasped a very deep hold on that state's economy and much of the United States underground economy and some parts of its legitimate economy. The RICO Act enabled police to to go after the kingpins of these
Essentially, RICO,
organizations
its
and
big
hobble them.
innovation, as I understand
Also,
it, was it said that if you can charge one member of an organized group with a particular crime, you can charge all the members of that group with a particular crime. And you pointed out in the book that Canada's laws haven't caught up with that. I think you described them as 1960s anti-organized crime laws in the 21st century. Is that where you think the focus should be, reforming our laws, having better anti-organized crime laws on the books?
that's one clear fix to me. And I would jump back to an example. We talked about the Sinaloa Cartel. It came out in testimony in BC's anti-money laundering inquiry. One of the main police characters of my book testified that the RCMP learned 7 Mexican cartels had set up in Vancouver. They're more active in Canada than the United States. RCMP tried for 7 months to get a wiretap on the Sinaloa cartel operatives in that city and were shut down. They couldn't do it, whereas Australian or US federal police can get a wiretap in 1, 2, or 3 days. To me, that was an illustration of what I'm told, and I know that, the Charter of Rights is a great document, but it's a great document for organized crime because it's very hard for Canadian police to get access to the lives of known super criminals. So that's the first step that I would say. Our laws are 30, 40 years behind where they need to be. And another case I make is that state-sponsored crime is such a powerful part of these networks in Canada. We need some anti-interference laws. Why not get a strong anti-interference laws and organized crime laws and put them together where they need to be? Then Canada could be a leader
Yeah,
in an area where it needs
that
to be.
sounds like a great idea, but it also seems to me like there sure is a lot of money to be made from just turning from willful blindness, as your book put it. So,
I really believe, and when you talk to enough very experienced people that say the same thing, they say, look, this is Canada. There are no consequences for financial crime. If a murder isn't involved in organized crime, if violence isn't involved, there's nothing we can do. We just ignore it. We're ignoring the system of finance that facilitates
well, it seems like the
organized
kind of
crime.
situation that sooner or later will come to a head and something will have to change.
It seems to me that what's coming to the millennial generation it almost seemed like they were up and ready to roll in the last federal election on housing, to the extent where the government, the party that eventually won, reversed course and said they would take a look at and even ban foreign investors. And so, to me, that's showing that change can happen. It comes from political
Yeah.
will or
Well,
political
the
pressure.
latest data suggests that very few households, renter households in this country, can afford to move up to being owner households at this point because of the prices. And I think if anything is going to put that political pressure to do something about this, it'll be those soaring prices. Anyway, thank you very much, Sam, for taking the time to talk to me. I appreciate it. It's been very illuminating. Folks, I strongly suggest you find a copy of Wilful Blindness by Sam Cooper if you can. That book will open your eyes about a lot of things in real estate and politics as well. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the subscribe button and hit the like button as well, because that will get YouTube to share this video more widely. Thanks, everyone. Have a good one. Bye-bye.